Welcome back to Houston Newsmakers, where I'm joined by Dr. Ruth Lopez Turley, Director of the Kinder Institute of Urban Research at Rice University, and the founder of HERC, the Houston Education Research Consortium, and Dr. Erin Baumgartner, now the director of HERC. So thank you both for being here, Dr. Lopez Turley and Dr. Baumgartner. We appreciate you. We've been talking about by the way, HERC is a partnership at the Kinder Institute, a part of a consortium of 11 HISDs. So you guys do a lot of research. You founded it, you're in it now, you're leading the direction. The TEA anticipated takeover of HISD. Dr. Lopez Turley, when you first heard that, what was your first inclination? You both wrote an op-ed. It was all kind of red flags about that. That doesn't end well.
Right. We both decided to write an op-ed about the research that exists regarding state takeovers, because we had heard a lot of conversations about the possible takeover, but unfortunately that conversation did not really say much about what research had to say. And as education researchers, we both decided it was important to add that into the mix, that it's important to inform the public about what research has to say about state takeovers.
So, Dr. Baum,
yes.
Do you think the people on state level, do they know the research? You do your best to provide it.
I mean, I think the people who are at the level of making this sort of decision, I imagine, don't take it lightly. So I would think that they've looked at the research and they have an understanding. They must think that there's something about their plan that's going to be different than what state takeovers have looked like around the country. And what we see is, on average, they tend to not really do much to support students and improve their outcomes.
I saw something that stood out for me as well. You say research shows that they've been most likely to occur in areas with higher concentrations of low-income students of color and in states with Republican governors. Is there any way to know why this trend is happening other than politics? Either one of you on that one.
Well, so we wanted to share that that's what the research shows. And by the way, I should add that the research that we're referring to was conducted by two researchers at UVA and Brown University. And what they did is they reviewed all of the state takeovers that have happened nationwide since the late 1980s, when they first started. So, and they analyzed the impact that those state takeovers had on student outcomes. And that's, as Erin just mentioned, that's what they found. They found that on average, they are not associated with an improvement in student outcomes. But in addition, they highlighted the fact that they're much more likely to occur in school districts with a high proportion of poor Black and brown students, and in school districts that happen to be in states with a Republican governor. So yes, that does give us pause, and we should question, why is this happening? But I have to say that research, although it's extremely informative about what happens on average, it doesn't really tell us why those state takeovers are not working.
So one of the things that you talk about, by the way, you guys at your institute, you're non-political. You do research, you don't take it, you're nonpartisan altogether, just all the way around. But sometimes what you recommend can become political. For example, you indicate in your op-ed that spending per pupil can make a big difference in how the educational levels are, but that becomes a political football, does it not?
I guess the question is, should it be a political football? We know that students across the country, particularly students from low-income backgrounds, do better when they're in schools that are better funded. They have more resources available to them, and it's helping them, catch up to a place where they haven't had opportunities so far. So we don't intend for that to be a political statement. We think that's a factual statement, that children who are in places that are better funded do better. We just hope that's something that people think about, as we know that's something that works for improving outcomes for students.
And we know that your organization, HERC, in your interaction with school districts, you've done a lot. And so research would indicate, I think, from what I've read, that there have been improvements made in districts that are urban districts, including HISD, correct?
Right. There are a lot of changes that have happened since 2019, set aside the pandemic for a moment, in terms of the superintendent who's in place, the board who's in place, the schools and how they're performing, which are some of the ways that have triggered the conversations about takeover in the first place. And so the district looks a lot different now than it did a few years ago. But that being said, we're not saying that there aren't things that could be improved.
What is your optimism, if there is any optimism, about some of what you're providing that can make a difference in helping those who make these kinds of decisions actually make decisions that are good for the students?
Well, as education researchers, our main hope here is that whatever the decision is that it is fully informed, that it is informed by research. And that's our job as researchers, to make sure that we're doing a good job of letting the public know, letting the decision makers know that there is research out there. This is what it shows. And our job is also to help translate that research, because we know that research is not always very accessible, both in terms, like literally accessible, but also in terms of the way it's written.
So there's a lot more to talk about on this topic. And so we're going to do that on this Newsmakers Extra. I alluded to that in the earlier segment. I told you it's going to be a real special Newsmakers Extra. We're going to do that because Dr. Ruth Simmons is going to be joining us for that Newsmakers Extra as we continue to talk about this topic on click2houston.com. Go to the Newsmakers Extra on that. So thank you both for sticking around for doing that.